jioni safu nola leyi demunyu skula nyephamne nekulukula nyepangiragala gena nyephamne nekulukula ibuloke nongoto ndibetisola ibuloke da
Bengi Kongo
Lamin
na
Lamin te jibe norin te nyamen Lamin
kabana wulo kono
nyinta mo Lamin
pabilenki
muna ngata afongole
haina
ngata ngoto le Fabrama
Bengi baba nyola
ngoto le Fabrama
namu jumala ka mandi ten
Fabrama
jumala mu
ndele bare muso
lunda manara
mo kata
jamani bere
alindo ko
jamani
bari ngoto man kontande
bari jamani fana na mudu wa kontan
ngoto minaka ngala min de fon filitala Lamin jibe nori nyala
Lamin ila siran sama ne benki yala so tol sayni no ko mo
ngoto
nam
itedinte yalo ne Lamin hakkilo diata bake karambu ngoto anu santeng ministry di ngole si suoko amake ko do holi de
si bitun
bagona de
ala ni ko kede namo balo
ala ni na ko na karta bulo be damna ala ni je
ngoto
nam
ngoto mon kontan fere
jamani mu ne keda
ifike Lamin ki wulo ko no nyinta mon ko do fete malo Lamin nyanta sila la be la moy kala karango
jamani karamol be soron ne ko fasita wulo ko nako
karambuwol ma soron ni ko karambuwol soron da amake kom holiday lem ngoto dini ngo nyanta sila la ala karango la moy yamen kamen fue man kontan andamande
alla nyin kombo courant adanda la kombo len do la jan karamol le soron do kamen courant ma rado la kombo e don do fana na karamol soron je karamol soron Lamin ada lo nyino la man tara fe na sokon ala mu nekela
Lamin ite fete malon ko le sinol be ke radio to
nga fine
e ko nyari mo Lamin ya mu na fonye
kabin mina kan ntambita nteri manyin Fatu ntambite la sukala ala dinngol bebe siri be la moy ka
faru danso am fana tambira jele ni subala la ngaje dinngol be jet talanta nen kili warol e be seri jele
sa Lamin fanante ku kili wo ke no la ba Lamin bita ka wulo ko no nyinta mo Lamin
amandara fenela
ite dine ko ni man si yakaru la suno la moy radio to balon na
mu ne ka ke afa ma nyara ni alon
telentel jikot
afa ne mu ne be ke
ite balon tel be jikritel ni man karambe ku kele yaje nata karana mbasa mala ya tarije
par ñarande kombo courant ho findira kombo ide na raje den sonka bay ko Lamin manya tala wulo ko karam mo be so afa nyambe
ko to wole nati bawo ngalle ni Lamin kuntala kombo courant o ka fa me kombo courant asototal wala kinay ko e sisu ko no bari ni ko e sisu ko no be karangol di ke la radio lin telel to hani tele masoto to nyaay man tele soto da bongo bar radio be bulen ko to batiri sanga ay si ay alamo
sa do kala nyaadi
ko ta o bulaji
ado kala nyaadi
kamun ke nyaadi
radio abe wala mo la be mona falaje
ibe la karandirol kala jele
ti talle be radio ko men ka karande
ila subjector baby jele baby jele
wala nanga chocho moy fa dan so wala ngombe tambi kana ngadi ningol de be ikadum bungo de ko kada marmo
ma asototal de
Lamin mala be kara wala de
bari laftalal ideal on ko inde every year second wala fourth
muna ni ko di ha ko de ko folle sinila ba ndele sinilo ne ba
mbasa mba foke en koto wole fango yen wulindi yalo famo keta bat yin fana bulata ko ko me yen nati jambi Lamin nyanta karana ntel beji ko be nyineka ya bulay kara wulo kono ta kilar ya bambalo yo be bulaje koto dinni ngoy si ayala le sino la moy radio
wara ka munda kara soro nyana kara si sura radio
la sila le ayala le sino
dal ko korno ko smalo
kilar ya
mo be ngala ko momo sa mi do ni ko no kera
bengi bruzo
ndelo ko la da ba rosa no radio ba no bari woro radio ni abe jele ba ngam radio man dembe guljan dala nyara nyara woro ko fendi mu Lamin tayra ba rosa
bara te ku folo ajibe nori nya Lamin tamete ku
bengi mun na re
teku
bari ko do famo ke
image nani nyambol si zol le ke je kisgi man si zol no le kafun ka nyoma bari nyambu kino ni manya na ka finde ni nambe ko zol la ni nambe ko zol la
ngalle limbeta de be nyambo do dilanna
nyara ni ko ridin fennat nyara nata
bari famo ke da
ngata bun kono tabi bun kono nyara ngando ko fele ko ke e baru nganda ni pelo la ndija
iyo a
la bun kono bismillah bisu diara
pendulala yefungo tanka sina dolu tanka koro korota koro
Good day, viewers and listeners. I am Master JCC. So today I'm here to continue teaching clauses. Last class we talked about dependent clauses, and we also looked at types of dependent clauses, and we said the first one we talked about, we define it, we've talked about it, we started looking at functions of noun clause, and then we talked about subject of a verb. And then what we said was when a noun clause is underlined before a verb, it is subject of that verb. And then we gave examples, after which you are given classwork to do. So I want us to review the classwork, that's to do corrections on the classwork before we proceed to our today's lesson. So today we are going to look at the other function of noun clause, which is object of a verb. So, but before we look at this, let's do corrections on our classwork that we did last time. So it goes this way. Give the grammatical name and function of the following underlined expressions. Number one, we say where the man was buried surprised everyone. The underlined word there is where the man was buried. And we said, while looking at this, it is a clause. What makes it a clause? Because there is a verb which is was. Now we have two verbs that are was and buried. Was is helping and buried is the main verb. So the was can change to is if you change the time. If you change the subject also, the was can change to where or are depending on the tense. So that is a noun clause because where the man was buried is also functioning as subject. And we know it's only nouns or noun phrases or clauses that act as subjects in expressions. So therefore that is a noun clause, and then it is subject of the verb surprised. We said also, for one to convince anybody that this is a noun clause, you can put what surprised everyone. If you put there what surprised everyone, the answer is going to be where the man was buried. So it is a noun clause and it is subject of the verb surprised. Then we move on to example 2. Example 2, what they are planning is very good. What they are planning is very good. If you put there what is very good, the answer is going to be what they are planning. So here, are can change to is, it can change to where, can change to was dependent. If you say what she, once you change the date third person plural to third person singular, either he or she or it, then the are changes to is. So that makes it a finite verb, and that makes it a clause. And it is a noun clause because it is underlined before the verb is. So what is very good? What they are planning. So it is a noun clause, it is subject of the verb is. Then we move on to number 3. Number 3, tourists who are in the house complained about their conditions. Tourists who are in the house complain about their conditions. If you place who before the verb complain, if you put there who complain about their conditions, the answer is going to be tourists who are in the house. So it is a noun clause and it is subject of the verb complain. What makes it a noun clause? Because we have are there, which can change to is or can change to where, depending on the subject or tense of the verb. Then we move on to number 4. We said strangers who walked to the market received some money. Here, if you put there who received some money, the answer is going to be strangers who walked to the market. So it is a noun clause because the walked can change to walk without the ed past tense morpheme added. You can just inflect it with s if two strangers change to only stranger, or if it is stranger still, you don't inflect it with anything, you only write the base form of the word walk. So that's the point. So the walked, the ed morpheme could be dropped for it to agree in terms of tense with the subject strangers. So that makes it a clause, and then it is subject of the verb received. Who received some money? Strangers who walked to the market. So it is a noun. Exam surprised everyone. If you put there what surprised everyone, the answer is going to be that Peter will pass the exam. So pass there can change to, when you look at will pass, pass is the main verb, will is a modal auxiliary verb. So will can change to would. So since will can change, that qualifies it to be called a clause. And since it is play a role of a noun or that is subject, then you can call it a noun clause, and it is subject of the verb surprised. Then the last example that we did was 6. Who was to be decorated? Doubted everyone. If you put down what doubted everyone, who was to be decorated. So therefore, the words can also change to is or so depending on the subject, and then since it can change, then it is a clause, and since the underlined word there, it is playing a role of a subject, then we call it a noun clause, and it is subject of the verb doubted. So that is the end of our class exercise. I hope you all did well in the course of our previous exercises, and then I know you are coping with this one too. So now we're going to move to the second function of noun clause. Noun clause also functions as an object of a verb. Now, it also functions as an object of a verb. Now, let's look at this. It says a noun clause that immediately comes after a verb. Apart from linking verbs, it functions as the object of that verb. Take note, if you have a noun clause and it comes after a verb, you must establish the category of verb. If the verb is a main verb or lexical, then you call it object of that verb. But once the verb is linking, then it becomes subject complement. So you take note. So once it is a linking verb, you cannot call a clause which comes after a linking verb as object of that verb. So you take note, they become complements. So we'll discuss that in our subsequent lesson that we will come to do next class. You see. So you take note of that. So what is the formula for object of a verb? That is, formula is verb plus noun clause equals to object of the verb as function. Now in the following sentences, while the noun clause is underlined, the verb is in bold. Good. Now we have example 1. Candidates should understand that they should not cheat in was. When you look at this, we say you can still put who or what before or after the verb and make a question. The underlined word will still serve as answer. If we say candidates should understand what, the answer is going to be that they should not cheat in was. That they should not cheat in was, the should can change to shall. Since the should can change from one form to another, it is a finite verb because it's a modal auxiliary verb, so it is a clause. And since it is playing role of an object, we call it a noun clause. And then it comes right after the verb understand, we call it object of. The candidates should understand that they should not cheat in was. So when you look at that, example 1, then we say grammatical name, we say it is a noun clause. And then grammatical function, we say it is object of the verb. What is the verb there? Verb understand. Good. Good. So that's the point. So we are looking at the example. Candidates should understand that they should not cheat in was. So it is telling us that they should not cheat in was is a noun clause, and since it is underlined after a main verb, it is object of that verb, and that main verb is understand. So we move on to example 2. It says Gambians want to know when the corona pandemic will end. When you look at when the corona pandemic will end, the will can change to would. So will is modal auxiliary verb. So since the will can change from one form to another, it qualifies it to be called a clause. And when you look at this clause, since it is underlined after a main verb, which is no, then you call it object of that verb. You see. So it means when a clause is before the verb, any verb, you call it subject of that verb. But once it is after a main verb, we call it object of that verb. You see. So we move on to example 3. Example 3 reads, the audience applauded whoever got a prize. The audience applauded whoever got a prize. So by looking at this example, whoever got a prize is a noun clause because the got can change to get or gets. You get the point? And it is underlined right after the main verb, which is applauded. You can say the audience applauded who. You get the point? The answer is going to be whoever got a prize. So it becomes a noun clause and it is object of the verb applauded. Then we move on to another example, which is example 4. Children usually believe what their parents tell them. If you put there who or what, the underlined word will serve as answer. Let's look at it. Children usually believe what? What their parents tell them. When you look at the underlined words, there's a word called tell, which can change to told and or tells. So that qualifies that to be called finite verb, and then that makes it a clause. So this is a noun clause, and since it is underlined after the main verb believe, then it is object of that verb. So that's the grammatical function there. Example 5. WAEC did not say whether students should continue to read or not. You get the point? So when you look at this also, should can change from one form to another. So that qualifies it to be called a clause. And since it is underlined after a main verb say, then it is a object of that verb. So that's it for object. So in short, we may also have, just as I said earlier, these are just some examples. We may have other examples where we may have other indicators. For instance, if we have something like example 1, if we say we saw those who insulted elders. Now those who insulted elders is on the line here. Let's look at one thing here. By looking at this example, we saw those who insulted elders. Here, this is a demonstrative pronoun. And we did say that nouns, pronouns, articles, or other words could act as indicators of noun clauses. So therefore, since you have those here, in this context, those is acting as a demonstrative pronoun. Therefore, it is a noun clause because the insulted can change to insult. Or you can say insult with S instead of ed morpheme. You can just inflect it with S. So that qualifies it to be called a noun clause. And now by looking at this, it can also answer the question who or what. Now if you put here we saw who, the answer is going to be those who insulted elders. And this GN, grammatical name, we have, it is a noun clause. It is a noun clause. It is a noun clause. And GF, grammatical function, we say it is object. It is object of the verb. What is the verb there, class? The verb saw. It is object of the verb saw. So you see the point. So it means now you have to look at indicators, they may help. In other words, these are the head words, the first words of an underlined expression. So look at the first word, it may help you to easily identify the role it plays. So by looking at this now, we know this, it has a pronoun as its indicator, and then it has a finite verb. You see, so therefore this is a noun clause, and then since it is underlined after the main verb so, it is acting as object of that verb. Example 2. We may have they insulted everyone who called the teacher. Everyone who called the teacher is underlined here. They insulted who? Everyone who called the teacher. So therefore, you see, this call can change to calls because this is an indefinite pronoun, but since the action is in the past, that's why it has taken the ed morpheme here. You get the point? And now they insulted who? Everyone who called the teacher. So this also becomes a noun clause and it is object of the verb insulted. Now when you look at the indicator here, since this is a pronoun, and we did say that a noun clause may also be introduced by pronoun, and in this context, everyone is an indefinite pronoun. So that qualifies it to be called noun, and then since it is underlined after the main verb insulted, that makes it a noun clause and it is object of the verb insulted. So basically that's it for noun clause. So you take note, this is a very simple thing. When a noun clause is underlined before any verb, it is subject of that verb. When a noun clause is underlined after a main verb, it is object of that verb. And when a noun clause is underlined after a linking verb, it is acting as complement. So you take note. So not every verb, but verb, you must categorize the verb. Is it main or is it linking? Once you are able to establish that, then you won't be in trouble to name it and then be able to give the exact function of that given expression, which is going to make you to get it correct. So let's have something else to do. We are coming to look at classwork now. It says, give the grammatical name and function of the underlined expressions. Now let's go through 1 to 6. Now, number 1, it says, they received what I sent for him. When we look at this example, if you put there, they received what? They received what? They received what? For instance, they received what I sent for him. Now, what I sent for him is underlined. If you put here, they received what? If you write your what on top, they received what? The answer is going to be what I sent for him. What makes this a clause? Because this sent can change to send to agree with I send. If you change the I to third person singular, then this sent will change to sends. And if you change the third person plural, it will only change to send, S-E-N-D. So that qualifies it to be called a clause. Since it is a clause, now you look at the location. Where is it underlined? This clause is underlined after the main verb received. So that qualifies it to be called object of that verb. If it were underlined before the verb received, it would have been subject of the verb. Now that it is underlined after it, you call it object of the verb received. So you can always answer the question, they receive what? What I sent for him. Example 2. It says, nobody knows where the warrior was buried. Nobody knows where the warrior was buried. When you look at this example, nobody knows where the warrior was buried. Now, by looking at this, where the warrior was buried is on a line. Good. Where the warrior was buried. Here we have two verbs, was and buried. Was is acting as auxiliary verb in this context, not linking, and then the buried is the main verb here. So when we look at this, it means what we do is simple. Nobody knows what. If you put the what here and put the question mark, nobody knows what, where the warrior was buried. Then, by looking at this, it means this is acting as object of what? That's the main verb knows. So this is the main verb here. If it were a linking verb, it would have been complement. You see, but now that this is the main verb knows, then the underlying word which comes after it is plain role of an object. So it is called a noun clause, and then it is object of the verb knows. So that's the grammatical this thing that you will give. Then we move on to example 3. Example 3. Now it says you should eat what you are given. You should eat what you are given. Now when you look at this, you should eat what you are given. Now by looking at this, what you are given is on a line. We have to look at the verb, the underlined word in relation to the verb. Now when you look at the underlined word, what is the last word before it? Is it. It is a main verb. So very well we know that this underlined word will act as object of such a verb. So therefore, what you are given is a clause because the are can change to is. It can change to where, depending on the subject and time. So that qualifies it to be called a noun clause. And since it is underlined after the main verb it, we say it is object of that verb. You see, so it is object of the verb it. You see, so that's it. So we move on to example 4. Example 4, it says he kicked the man who was drinking. He kicked the man who was drinking. The man who was drinking is on the line. Now he kicked the man who was drinking. The man who was drinking is on the line. By looking at this, when you look at the underlined words, we have a verb phrase there, was drinking. And in this context, drinking is acting as a main verb, while was here is not linking verb, but is acting as an auxiliary verb. So it is helping the main verb drinking. So that makes it finite because this was can change to is, can change to are or was, depending on the tense or number of the subject. So once you change the subject, the was will change. Though drinking won't change because it is the main verb here, but then the auxiliary verb will keep changing to agree with the tense and number of the verb or the subject. So if you also say he kicked what or he kicked who, for instance, he kicked who, the answer is going to be the man who was drinking. So in this we say it is a noun clause. It is a noun clause. It is a noun clause. Grammatical function, you say it is object. It is object of the verb. It is object of the verb kicked. It is object of the verb kicked. Good. So that's it. So we move on to example 5. Example 5. Good. The world slapped the painters who were speaking on the phone. The world slapped the painters who were speaking on the phone. Now, when you look at this, the painters who were speaking on the phone, the word slap. When you look at this, semantically, but syntactically is correct because we know word, but when you look at it syntactically, it is a subject and then it's very correct. Just like if you put there the word slap the painters. So equally you can put there the three wrong, but when you come to syntax, nothing is wrong. So this is very correct, so you take note. So the word slapped who, the answer is going to be, if you put here who, the word slapped who, the answer is going to be the painters who were speaking on the phone. The painters who were speaking on the phone. So this were speaking can change to, you can change this to are. So this were makes this to be called a clause because the where is a finite verb. You can change one form to another to agree with the subject or tense. So that's it. So in this we say this is a noun clause, and you look at the last word. What is the last word here is slapped. So this slapped is not a linking verb but a main verb. So it is a noun clause and it is object of the verb slapped. Then we move on to the last example under on the object of verb. The ball hit the tree that grows in the field. The ball hit the tree that grows now. When you look at this, the tree that grows in the field is underlined. The ball hit what? The ball hit what? If you put what here, the ball hit what? The answer is going to be the tree that grows in the field. So this is a noun clause because this grows can change to grew. It can change to grow by dropping the S inflection. Or you can change the tense from present to past and it becomes grew instead of grows. So that qualifies it to be called a clause. And since it has indicators for it to be called, this is a noun clause, and then the grammatical function we say it is object of the verb hit. So from there we move on to object of a preposition. Now for object of verb, now we are moving to the next function of a noun phrase. So when we come next class, we are going to look at object of a preposition, or we call it prepositional complement. You see, so it means now noun clauses are not only limited to these two, but take note, these two are very important. From 1988 up to date, anytime they bring noun clauses in exam, 99% or more fall under one of these categories. They are either noun as subjects of verbs or objects of verb. So in short, when a noun clause is underlined before any verb, it is subject of that verb. But when it is underlined after main verbs, we call them object of such verbs. But once they are linking verbs, as we'll come to see in our next class, they are called complements. So on that note, I thank you for your kind attention. Until I come your way next class, have a nice day.